Welcome to my channel, Rise Up with Steve. Please hit like, subscribe, and don't forget to share with your friends.
Let me tell you something most people won't tell you. When a man truly cares about you, his behavior may confuse you before it convinces you. Because love doesn't always show up loud. Sometimes love shows up cautious. Sometimes it shows up scared. And sometimes love shows up looking like distance. A man who is in love doesn't always know how to handle the weight of his emotions. When he realizes you matter more than he expected, he slows down, not because he's losing interest, but because he's realizing what he could lose. Men are problem solvers by nature, and when emotions hit us that we can't control, we step back to think. We don't run to talk about it. We run to understand it. If he checks on you without a reason, that's not accidental. If he remembers small details you never thought mattered, that's not coincidence. A man doesn't store information about a woman he doesn't care about. We don't invest memory in something temporary. If he's protecting your feelings, watching his words, or choosing silence instead of saying something careless, that's not avoidance. That's emotional responsibility. Sometimes a man pulls back because he wants to come back better. He's asking himself, can I provide? Can I lead? Can I protect? Because when love becomes real, so does accountability. And accountability scares people who are still growing. A man in love doesn't want to disappoint you, so he retreats to fix himself. When a man is truly in love, his behavior doesn't always match the romantic stories people expect. Love is not always loud, expressive, or perfectly timed. Sometimes love shows up quietly, wrapped in confusion, fear, and responsibility. When a man realizes that a woman matters more to him than he planned, his first reaction is not always to chase harder. Often it is to pause. Not because he wants distance, but because he feels the weight of what love demands from him. Men are raised to be providers, protectors, and problem solvers. So when love hits deeply, it doesn't feel light. It feels serious. A man starts asking himself questions he never asked before. Am I good enough? Can I give her what she deserves? Can I be consistent, loyal, and strong when life gets hard? These questions don't come from a man who is uninterested. They come from a man who cares so much that he doesn't want to fail. When a man begins to pull back slightly, it is often because his emotions have become real. Love creates vulnerability, and vulnerability is uncomfortable for someone who has spent his life hiding his feelings. He may need time to understand what he is feeling, not to escape it, but to make sense of it. Men process emotions internally. Silence is not always disinterest. Sometimes it is emotional processing. If he checks on you even when he's busy, if he notices when something is wrong without you explaining it, that is not accidental behavior. Men do not emotionally invest in people they do not care about. They don't remember small details, moods, or personal struggles unless those things matter to them. Love shows up in attention, not just words. A man who is in love becomes careful. He watches what he says because he knows his words can hurt or heal. He may choose silence over careless speech. That is not avoidance. It is self-control. A man who doesn't care will say anything and walk away without concern. A man who loves you thinks before he speaks because your feelings matter to him. Sometimes distance is not about you at all. It is about him trying to grow into the man he believes you deserve. When love becomes serious, responsibility becomes heavy. A man in love doesn't want to show up half prepared. He wants to be stable, secure, and certain. So he steps back to get himself together, not to let you go, but to come back stronger. There is a big difference between disappearing and taking space. A man who is avoiding you cuts communication completely and never circles back. A man who is in love may reduce contact for a while, but he never fully lets go. He still checks in. He still cares. His actions continue to show presence even when words are limited. Love does not always move in a straight line. Sometimes it slows down so it can last longer. Sometimes it pauses so it can deepen. A man who is in love may struggle to balance his emotions, his responsibilities, and his fears. But love always leaves evidence. It shows up in consistency, respect, and intention. If he returns calmer, clearer, and more focused, that is not coincidence. That is growth. That is a man who took time to understand his feelings and chose you again with more certainty. Love that survives distance is often stronger than love that never faced it. So instead of assuming that space means rejection, look at the pattern. Look at the care. Look at the effort that remains. Love doesn't vanish quietly. It either fades completely or it transforms. And when a man is truly in love, even his silence has meaning, and even his distance is connected to a desire to do right by you. When a man falls in love, the experience often catches him off guard. It doesn't arrive gently or logically. It comes with responsibility, fear, and an unexpected sense of vulnerability. Many people misunderstand this stage because they expect love to look like constant attention and nonstop communication. But for a man who truly feels something deep, love can feel overwhelming. Instead of running toward it with words, he may step back to understand what he is feeling and what it means for his life. A man in love begins to see you as part of his future, and that realization changes everything. Suddenly, his decisions carry weight. His habits, his finances, his goals, and even his emotional stability feel important in a way they never did before. This is why he may become quieter. He is not losing interest, he is becoming serious. Love stops being entertainment and starts becoming responsibility. Men are not taught how to express emotions openly. They are taught to be strong, to handle things alone, and to avoid appearing unsure. So when love exposes emotions they cannot control, many men retreat inward. Silence becomes a safe space where they can think clearly without risking saying the wrong thing. This silence is not absence. It is reflection. If he still shows care through actions, that is where the truth is. If he checks on you, supports you, or shows concern even from a distance, those are signs of emotional investment. Men do not put energy into someone they plan to lose. They invest time and thought only where their heart is involved. A man who loves you becomes protective of your feelings. He doesn't want to argue unnecessarily or hurt you with careless words. So instead of reacting emotionally, he may choose space. That space is often him trying to respond wisely rather than emotionally. A man who doesn't care reacts instantly and moves on. A man who loves you thinks deeply before acting. Fear also plays a role. Love creates the possibility of loss, and loss is terrifying. When a man realizes how much you mean to him, he also realizes how deeply he could be hurt. Pulling back can be a subconscious way of protecting himself while he builds emotional courage. It is not a lack of love, it is the fear of loving fully. There is also the pressure of expectation. A man in love wants to be enough. He wants to show up correctly. He wants to provide stability, not chaos. If he feels he is not ready, he may pause to work on himself. That pause is not about pushing you away. It is about becoming someone worthy of staying. The key difference between avoidance and love is intention. Avoidance has no return. Love always circles back. A man who loves you never truly disconnects. Even in distance, his concern remains. Even in silence, his attention does not disappear. Love doesn't vanish without explanation. It transforms and matures. When he comes back more grounded, more intentional, and more honest, that is the evidence. Love that has been processed is stronger than love that is rushed. A man who steps back and returns with clarity is showing growth, not disinterest. So when you see distance, do not immediately assume rejection. Watch the consistency beneath it. Watch the effort that continues quietly. Love is not always loud. Sometimes it is thoughtful, cautious, and deeply intentional. And when a man is truly in love, even his distance is guided by care, responsibility, and the desire to do right by the woman who matters to him. When a man is in love, his actions are not always what people expect. Many women mistake distance, pauses, or silence as disinterest. But for a man who truly loves, these behaviors often have a deeper meaning. Love is not always about constant texting, calling, or showing up visibly. Sometimes love is quiet, sometimes love is careful, and sometimes love is about watching and protecting someone you care about without making it obvious. A man in love wants to be sure before he acts, and that caution is not avoidance. It is thoughtfulness. Men process love differently than women. While women often express emotions outwardly, men frequently handle their feelings internally. When a man starts realizing that he has strong feelings for a woman, he may need time to understand what that means for him and for the relationship. He may pull back to reflect on his emotions, to plan how to act responsibly, or to ensure that he is being a man worthy of her love. This inward focus is often mistaken for coldness, but it is actually a sign of seriousness. Love brings responsibility, and responsibility requires reflection. Attention to small details is another sign that a man is in love. He may notice the things you mention casually, remember events you thought were insignificant, or check on you without making it obvious. These actions show that he cares more than he says. Men rarely invest effort into someone they do not care about. If a man remembers your favorite food, your worries, or the little stories you tell him, it is because your life matters to him. A man in love stores information, not for manipulation, but because your happiness and well-being are important to him. Protecting your feelings is a major way men show love without words. When a man is deeply in love, he becomes aware of how powerful words and actions can be. He may choose to remain silent instead of saying something careless that could hurt you. He may avoid unnecessary conflict because he values your emotional safety. This does not mean he is avoiding you or that he is losing interest. It means he is being thoughtful and responsible. Love drives men to act carefully, not recklessly. Sometimes a man in love will take physical or emotional space to improve himself. Love makes men want to be better, not just for themselves, but for the person they care about. He may focus on his career, finances, emotional stability, or personal growth so that he can be a dependable partner. Distance in this context is temporary and purposeful. A man who loves you does not disappear. He steps back to ensure that when he comes forward, he can give his best. This type of distance is an investment, not a withdrawal. Consistency is the key indicator of true love. Even if a man is not always communicating or is taking time for himself, his actions will show a pattern of care. He may check on you, support you, or show concern in ways that are quiet but consistent. A man who does not care disappears without a trace. A man in love remains present in ways that matter, even if they are subtle. Actions, not mere words, reveal his intentions. Fear also influences behavior. Love opens a man up to vulnerability, and vulnerability can be frightening. He may worry about losing you, about failing you, or about being hurt himself. That fear can cause him to take a step back, not to leave, but to gain courage and clarity. A man who truly loves is willing to face his fears and return with intention. He may seem distant, but he is thinking about how to love you the right way. Even when a man is silent or takes a step back, he never stops caring. His actions, his attention to detail, and his effort to protect you emotionally all point to love. Distance is not the absence of love. It is a sign that he is processing, growing, and preparing to give his best. A man in love comes back with clarity, commitment, and purpose because love is about more than feelings. It is about responsibility, care, and respect. True love often speaks quietly but consistently, and a man who loves you will show it in ways that matter more than words ever could. When a man is in love, his actions are guided by intention rather than impulse. Many women misinterpret a man's behavior when he steps back or appears distant. But often this is not rejection. It is reflection. Love is not always about constant attention or words. Sometimes it is about quiet observation, careful thought, and protecting the emotional bond he values. A man who truly loves does not need to prove it constantly because his feelings influence everything he does, whether he is near or far. His love is shown through consideration, consistency, and thoughtful action. Men process their emotions internally. Unlike women who often share feelings openly, men are taught to be strong, self-reliant, and controlled. When love strikes deeply, it can overwhelm a man because it challenges everything he believes about himself. A man in love will sometimes pull back, not to avoid the relationship, but to understand how to handle it properly. He asks himself important questions about how to provide, how to protect, and how to ensure he is the partner the woman deserves. This pause is a sign of seriousness, not indifference. Small gestures often reveal a man's true feelings. If he remembers tiny details you mentioned in passing, notices changes in your mood, or checks on you without being asked, these are clear signs of investment. Men rarely pay attention to things that do not matter to them. When he stores these details, it shows that he values you deeply and that your life, happiness, and well-being are important to him. These actions may seem subtle, but they are far more significant than words alone. A man in love also becomes protective of your emotions. He is aware that careless words or hasty actions can hurt someone he cares about. Therefore, he may choose silence over speaking impulsively or distance over confrontation to ensure that he does not create unnecessary pain. This behavior should not be mistaken for avoidance. A man who does not care acts without thought. A man who loves chooses his words and actions carefully. His love drives him to act responsibly, even if that means temporarily stepping back. Love motivates growth and improvement. When a man steps away, it is often to work on himself so he can be the best version of the partner you deserve. He may focus on his career, emotional maturity, or personal stability because he understands that true love requires contribution and reliability. Distance is not a sign of withdrawal. It is an investment in the future of the relationship. A man who loves you takes the time to ensure that he can offer support, stability, and protection when he is present. Consistency is the hallmark of true love. Even when a man communicates less or creates space for reflection, his actions show a pattern of care. He may check on you, support you quietly, or make sacrifices that are not immediately visible. A man who does not care disappears entirely, leaving no trace. A man who loves demonstrates attention, concern, and effort consistently, even in ways that are subtle or indirect. This pattern is the evidence of intentional love. Fear and vulnerability also play a role in a man's behavior. Love exposes him to the risk of loss, rejection, and hurt, and this can cause hesitation. He may take a step back to gain emotional clarity and courage. However, a man who is truly in love does not run from these fears. He faces them and returns with purpose. Distance in this context is temporary, strategic, and deeply connected to his desire to love correctly. Even when a man appears distant, he continues to care. His quiet attention, protective instincts, and thoughtful actions are all expressions of love. True love is not loud, it is intentional. A man who loves you will show up when it matters, even if he steps back temporarily. His actions, consistency, and care reveal the depth of his feelings. Distance is not a sign of disinterest, but of reflection, growth, and preparation. Love that is genuine, thoughtful, and intentional often speaks louder than words, and a man in love demonstrates this every day, whether he is present physically or emotionally. When a man is in love, his actions are often misunderstood because love doesn't always look the way people expect. Many women assume that distance, pauses, or quietness mean he is losing interest, but the truth is often the opposite. A man who truly cares will sometimes withdraw, not to avoid you, but to process his feelings and ensure that he is being intentional in his actions. Love for a man is not just about emotion. It's about responsibility, thoughtfulness, and preparation. It's about wanting to show up in the right way rather than rushing blindly into expressions of affection. Men are naturally problem solvers, and when they fall in love, they often approach it like a challenge that requires careful thought. He asks himself questions he never asked before. How can I be the partner she deserves? Am I prepared to handle the responsibilities of a serious relationship? Can I protect her, support her, and make her feel valued consistently? These reflections may make him seem distant, but they are proof that he takes love seriously. Unlike someone who doesn't care, a man in love weighs his decisions carefully because he knows his actions have consequences. Attention to detail is one of the most telling signs that a man is in love. He may remember things you casually mentioned weeks ago or notice subtle changes in your mood. He might check on you without prompting, offer help quietly, or act in ways that are considerate without drawing attention. Men do not expend energy or memory on people they do not care about. If he is storing small pieces of information about you and acting on them, it is a reflection of the importance he places on you and the relationship. Love motivates this kind of attentiveness and thoughtfulness. A man in love is also protective of your feelings. He understands the power of words and actions and will often choose silence or restraint instead of risking unnecessary conflict or hurt. He may step back from conversations or situations that could lead to misunderstandings, not because he doesn't care, but because he does care deeply and wants to avoid causing you pain. His thoughtfulness and emotional control are signs of maturity, not avoidance. A man who is indifferent acts impulsively and leaves without concern. A man in love calculates his words and actions because your well-being matters to him. Sometimes the distance a man creates is about personal growth. When he steps back, it is often to improve himself so he can offer stability, protection, and consistency. He may focus on his career, finances, emotional maturity, or life goals to ensure that when he is fully present, he can be the partner you deserve. This type of distance is not a withdrawal from love. It is an investment in the relationship's future. He wants to be better for you, not just show up physically or emotionally without preparation. Consistency is the true indicator of a man's love. Even if he communicates less, his pattern of care remains. He may check in quietly, remember important details, or make sacrifices that are subtle but meaningful. A man who does not care disappears entirely, showing no effort or thought. A man in love demonstrates presence and reliability, even in ways that are not immediately visible. These consistent actions, small as they may seem, reflect deep emotional investment. Fear of vulnerability can also make a man retreat temporarily. Love exposes him to risk of failure, risk of loss, risk of emotional pain. This fear can lead to pauses or reflection. But a man who is truly in love faces his fears and returns with intention and clarity. Distance is not rejection. It is preparation, self-reflection, and growth. Love requires courage, and stepping back to gain that courage is part of the process. Even when a man appears distant, his love remains evident through subtle actions, care, and consideration. He may not always express his feelings openly, but his thoughtfulness, protection of your emotions, and consistent behavior speak volumes. True love is not about constant visibility. It is about intention, responsibility, and quiet care. A man who loves you will always return with clarity, commitment, and purpose. His distance is never a sign of disinterest. It is evidence that he values you and the relationship enough to handle it with care, thoughtfulness, and love. When a man is in love, his actions are often guided by his intentions rather than his impulses. Many women misinterpret a man's quietness, pauses, or temporary distance as a lack of interest. But in reality, it can be one of the clearest signs of deep affection. Love is not always about constant messages, calls, or visible attention. True love is intentional, thoughtful, and often requires patience. A man who loves you deeply will sometimes step back, not to push you away, but to reflect on his feelings, ensure he is acting responsibly, and prepare to show up in the best way possible. Men process emotions internally. Unlike women, who are often encouraged to express feelings openly, men are frequently taught to hide vulnerability and handle things on their own. When they fall in love, this internalization can make them appear distant. They may be asking themselves difficult questions. Am I the man she deserves? Can I provide stability and security? Am I emotionally ready to give her the love she needs? These moments of reflection are not signs of disinterest. They are proof that he takes his role seriously and wants to act intentionally rather than recklessly. Love for a man is intertwined with responsibility, and responsibility sometimes requires stepping back to gain clarity. Attention to detail is one of the most consistent signs that a man is in love. He notices the little things about you that others might overlook. the way you smile at something silly, a subtle change in your mood, or a small preference you mentioned in passing. He remembers these details and uses them to show care in ways that may not always be obvious. Men rarely invest this kind of energy in people they do not care about. When he stores these moments in his mind and acts on them thoughtfully, it demonstrates that you occupy a meaningful place in his life. A man in love often becomes protective of your feelings. He understands that careless words or actions can hurt someone he deeply cares about. Instead of reacting impulsively, he may choose to step back, stay quiet, or avoid situations that could lead to conflict. This is not avoidance or lack of interest. It is mindfulness. He values you and your emotional well-being, so he carefully weighs his words and actions. A man who does not care does not think before he acts. A man in love does, because protecting you is a priority for him. Distance can also be a sign that he is working on personal growth. Love often inspires a man to want to be better, not just for himself, but for the person he loves. He may focus on his career, financial stability, emotional growth, or other areas of life to ensure that he can show up as a partner who is capable, reliable, and strong. This kind of distance is purposeful. It is not a withdrawal from the relationship, it is preparation. He wants to ensure that when he is fully present, he can give you his best self without excuses. Consistency is key in understanding a man's love. Even if he communicates less or seems to pull back occasionally, his underlying pattern of care reveals his true intentions. He may check on you quietly, offer support in subtle ways, or remember important details that matter to you. A man who does not care disappears entirely, showing no thought or effort. A man in love demonstrates presence and commitment in ways that may not always be visible, but they are steady and meaningful. These actions are far more important than constant words or attention. Fear and vulnerability also influence a man's behavior. Love opens him up to emotional risk, and risk can be intimidating. The fear of failing, losing you, or being hurt himself may cause him to pause. But this pause is temporary and often leads to reflection, growth, and clarity. A man who loves you will face his fears, process his emotions, and return with intention and purpose. Distance in this context is not rejection, it is preparation and maturity. Even when he appears distant, his love remains evident through his actions, thoughtfulness, and consistency. True love is not loud, it is deliberate. A man who loves you will continue to care, protect your emotions, and invest in the relationship, even if he needs moments of space to grow and reflect. His distance is never a sign of disinterest. It is proof that he values you deeply and wants to act responsibly, intentionally, and with love that is genuine, lasting, and meaningful.